Live from Hazard, Kentucky, this is Jammin' John's Wrestling News. Here's your news for Monday, March 11th, 2019. We start off with some breaking news out of the WWE. Earlier tonight on Monday Night Raw, Bobby Lashley defeated Finn Balor with the help of Lio Rush to regain the Intercontinental Championship. So once again, breaking news out of the WWE, Bobby Lashley is the brand new Intercontinental Champion. Also tonight on Monday Night Raw, it was announced that Alexa Bliss would be the special guest host of Wrestlemania 35. And also tonight on Monday Night Raw, Triple H had a rather strange confrontation with Batista wanting a match at WrestleMania. Triple H agreed to the match but said it would be a no-holds-barred match. And the breaking news does not stop from Monday Night Raw. Earlier tonight, Kurt Angle announced that he will have his farewell match at WrestleMania 35. Angle will go on to defeat Apollo Crews in front of his hometown fans in Pittsburgh, PA for the final time. A couple days ago, I talked about Jushin Thunder Liger retiring from professional wrestling, and now Kurt Angle is going to be retiring from professional wrestling. Kurt Angle, one of the greatest professional wrestlers I've ever seen, and he was actually the very first professional wrestler that I ever seen on television. I remember seeing him, I believe, on Sunday Night Heat back in late 1998, wrestling Edge. I remember going into my uncle's room and sitting down and watching them wrestle, and I had no idea what was going on, but all I remember is I seen Kurt Angle and I instantly liked him. And it was in that moment that I became a professional wrestling fan. A year later, when I was 5 years old, I remember watching WCW and seeing Sting. And even though Sting became my first real favorite professional wrestler, my first favorite pro wrestler was Kurt Angle. I remember watching WCW up until the WWF bought it in 2001, and I stopped watching pro wrestling for a while after that. And I remember around November 2001, I said to myself, I think I'm going to try to watch WWF again, because I had seen some episodes of Raw during the Monday Night Wars and the Attitude Era, but I watched Monday Nitro a lot more than I did Monday Night Raw. So I decided to just give it a chance again, and when I started watching WWF again for the first time in a while, the first thing I seen was that segment where Stone Cold Steve Austin has the guitar and he's singing Kumbaya to Vince McMahon, during the whole Alliance storyline, I believe. And Kurt Angle just comes out of nowhere, and he takes the guitar from Steve Austin, and he's like, "Oh, we got a sing-along going on." And he starts singing Jimmy Crack Corn. And I tell you, at 7 years old, that made me bust a gut. I was laughing so hard at Kurt Angle, and I was just thinking to myself, this guy is my favorite in the WWF because of just the funny and stupid things that he would do on television. And then, I remember watching Monday Night Raw, I think a couple of weeks after that, and Stone Cold has got the cowboy hats. He gives one to Vince McMahon, he puts one on his head, and then Kurt Angle is just like, "Where's my cowboy hat?" And so he puts his cowboy hat on that Steve Austin gave him, and it's a really, really small cowboy hat. And years later, in 2017, that picture of Kurt Angle wearing the small cowboy hat became a meme on Discord, specifically the wrestling Discord, as yours truly went and called himself Burt Wrangle on there. And that was my profile picture, and that just quickly became a meme on the wrestling Discord. And almost 2 years later, Burt Wrangle is still my gimmick on TWD. And so, it's because I like Kurt, and I always thought that was a funny picture of Kurt. So that gimmick is still going strong, and it's all because of him. Around December 2001, I got a PlayStation 2 for Christmas. One of the first games I ever played for it was WWF SmackDown Just Bring It, which is my all-time favorite wrestling game. And Kurt Angle was in it, and I remember playing as Kurt Angle a whole lot in that game, doing the angle slam to Rikishi and Fred Durst and people like that, and it was just so fun to play that. And around the time that SmackDown Shut Your Mouth was about to come out in 2002, I remember him having his hair versus hair match against Edge, and I remember Kurt losing that match and getting his head shaved. And then I think about a week later on SmackDown, he had the wrestling headgear on with the wig, and Then I remember him having an incredible match with Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 19. Whenever he was a part of Team Angle, you had Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin, and Kurt was the undisputed champion. It was so awesome. That was such an incredible time in his career when he had Team Angle, and that was, to me, that was his peak in WWE whenever he was the leader of Team Angle and he was undisputed champion and stuff. I remember him going and doing Sexy Kurt with Sherry Martel. I thought that was just so funny, and man, one of my all-time favorite moments of Kurt Angle. Another favorite moment of mine was the milk truck where Jim Ross said, "The billion-dollar princess is now a Dairy Queen." I thought that was so great. That was such an awesome moment in WWF. I loved his matches in 2005 with John Cena, in 2006. And then around the 2006 draft, he got drafted to ECW, and he started having a lot of problems with WWE, and he decided to go to TNA, which is now Impact Wrestling. And he instantly became one of the main guys in TNA, next to Sting, next to Christian, Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, Kevin Nash. He was right up there with those guys. And I remember in April 2009, TNA done a house show in Pikeville, Kentucky, which is an hour away from where I live. They done a house show at this place called the East Kentucky Expo Center, which probably holds about 5, 8, 10,000 people. And I remember getting front row seats to that TNA house show, and Kurt Angle came out during the main event. And out of all the signatures that I got that night, out of meeting all the guys in TNA, the one person that I loved meeting that night was Kurt Angle. Before I met him, Jeremy Borash got a microphone and he announced to the crowd that Kurt Angle donated $15,000 to a coal mining foundation to help coal miners find jobs, to get coal miners money to feed their family. Kurt Angle donated $15,000 to these coal miners that were struggling, because around that time, coal mines were shutting down because coal is a non-renewable resource, and it was starting to go out in eastern Kentucky, and the EPA was putting a lot of tough sanctions and stuff on coal mines around that time. And so it was just really hard for eastern Kentucky. Our economy went down because we relied on coal for so many years. And Kurt Angle going and donating that money to coal mining families was so awesome, and I have a lot of respect for him for doing that. And then he announced to the crowd that he wanted everybody to come into the ring and meet him. And I remember at 15 years old getting in the ring. First time I ever been in a pro wrestling ring. That was the 6-sided ring back around that time in TNA. And I shook Kurt Angle's hand. I said, "Thank you for just giving us a great show tonight." And I remember him grabbing a hold of my shoulder, and that dude was purely strong. I tell you what, man, he was strong, because he put a real strong grip on my shoulder. And he was just such a cool guy to meet in person. And boy, oh boy, what are the odds of meeting the first wrestler that you ever seen on television, the guy that made you basically a wrestling fan? What are the odds that you meet him in person? It was so cool. It was really awesome. It was a great moment. It's a moment I'll never forget. And Kurt, he had a lot of great matches in TNA. He left, and then he came back to the WWE, had a lot of great matches. He also had a great steel cage match against Cody Rhodes on the independent scene before he came back to the WWE. And you definitely need to go check that out if you haven't seen that. But, man, Kurt will never be forgotten. He's forever going to be one of the all-time greats in pro wrestling. He made me a wrestling fan. He made me Burt Wrangle. And most of all, Kurt, thank you so much, man, for all those great times. Back in 2009, Eastern Kentucky said, "Thank you, Kurt, because you helped out the coal miners here." And nearly 10 years later, the entire world is saying, "Thank you, Kurt." And man, in my heart, you will always be my favorite WWE wrestler, and you'll forever be one of the greatest professional wrestlers to ever step foot in the squared circle. Oh, it's true. It's damn true. And Jushin and Kurt aren't the only ones who are retiring. On this week's episode of Total Bellas, Brie Bella said the following: I decided that after Evolution, I'm going to be fully retired. Fully done. I love WWE, but the one thing I learned is that I can't do everything. I just can't. Brie continued on by saying, I know a couple months ago I told you I wasn't ready for baby number 2 because I have a lot on my plate. But I've been thinking about it a lot, and I think the comeback really made me realize that I'm actually ready. And I do want Birdie and our next baby to be close in age. On the episode, Nikki Bella gave her thoughts by saying, talk about dropping 2 huge bombs. I guess retirement I always thought would be something that Brie and I would talk about together. I just did not expect this big change after such an incredible comeback. Thanks to eonline.com for the quotes. The WWE announced the following today: world-traveled ring veteran Robert Strauss, renowned manager Stokely Hathaway, and second-generation wrestler Cal Bloom are the newest recruits to join the WWE Performance Center this week in Orlando, Florida. Strauss has been a fixture of the independent scene since making his debut in 2001, while still a teenager. Competing under ring names like Robbie E. and Rob Echoes, he has won more than 24 championships throughout his career, as well as wrestled in 46 states and more than 20 countries. In addition to his exploits in sports entertainment, the New Jersey native has appeared on reality shows, making it to the finals on the 25th season of CBS's Amazing Race and participating in the trials on the Titan Games, the competition series created by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnston. Strauss also starred in Muscle and Fitness's Dad Bod Destroyer video series. Hathaway comes to the Performance Center after a successful tenure as a manager and wrestler on the independent scene. Although trained for the ring, Hathaway gained a reputation in recent years for wheeling and dealing on behalf of other wrestlers. The notoriously outspoken Hathaway has represented clients in several promotions throughout the U.S., from Evolve Wrestling to the New England-based Beyond Wrestling. He hails from New York City. And Bloom, meanwhile, brings a sports entertainment pedigree to the Performance Center. The 6'5", 255-pounder is the son of former WWE superstar Wayne Bloom, who wrestled as Bo Beverly in the early 1990s. The younger Bloom played tight end at the University of Central Florida, making 4 bowl game appearances, including UCF's Fiesta Bowl win against Baylor University. He also received the team's Iron Knight Award for Strongest Player after bench pressing 500 pounds, a record for UCF tight ends. Although he hasn't yet had a match, the 25-year-old Bloom has received training from his father Wayne, WWE alumni King Kennedy, and Fame wrestling coach Brad Renegans. Big congratulations to these brand new signees for the WWE. During an appearance on the Total Engagement podcast, former WWE music composer Jim Johnston talked about his departure from the company in 2017. Johnston spoke about how WWE barely used him towards the end of his run. Jim Johnston said, I don't want a job where I don't have to work. There wasn't ever a millisecond where I thought, wow, isn't this great? I'm really not doing that much music, but they're continuing to pay me. Oh my God, what a great deal. It was awful. I hated it. I hated that feeling. I've got handcuffs on. I can't contribute, and I eventually told Vince that as well. I said, this is not right. I also told him at the time, is like, hey, if you're unhappy with me, fire me. Fire me right now. You can fire me right now. I'm taking the pressure off. Go ahead, fire me. Because that's not the way I roll. I didn't like it. Johnston also talked about the difference between writing music for heels and faces by saying, I think music for bad guys always comes down to, do you believe how great I am? Can you believe it? And Mr. Perfect was a really strong character, and he played it really well. He was charismatically bad, and he really exuded that when he came out, with the hands up in the air. That was his vibe. Come on now, it's a little hard to believe. How great am I, isn't it? I mean, it's hard for me to believe, for God's sake. It's like a monumental concerto to himself, whereas music for good guys is more of a celebration for everyone. It's more coming out and going out to the crowd. It's almost like this is what the crowd feels about you and how much we love you and how much we're supporting you. And bad guys, I think it comes more to it's all about them. So it's how they see themselves. And when asked directly about possibly writing music for All Elite Wrestling, Johnston replied with the following comment, sure, absolutely. Just give me a call. In a recent NoDQ.com poll, 86% of respondents voted that they would like to see All Elite Wrestling hire Johnston. Thanks to WrestleZone.com for the quotes. And finally, here on Jammin' John's Wrestling News, the WWE announced the following today. Booker T and Stevie Ray were one of the most dominant tag teams of the 1990s, steamrolling over the competition in WCW to become tag team champions on 10 occasions. Now the brothers will be immortalized in sports entertainment history. Harlem Heat are the latest inductees in the WWE Hall of Fame's class of 2019. They'll enter the fabled hall on the eve of Wrestlemania 35, Saturday, April 6 at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. With this induction, Booker T will become a two-time WWE Hall of Fame inductee, joining Ric Flair and fellow 2019 inductee Shawn Michaels of D-Generation X. The news was first reported by USA Today. Bursting on the scene straight off 110th Street in Harlem, New York, Booker T and Stevie Ray arrived in WCW in summer 1993, bringing a streetwise, in-your-face attitude to the squared circle. They stared directly into the camera on their way to the ring, warning fans at home that they were about to bust some heads when they stepped between the ropes. And bust heads they did. Harlem Heat wasted no time in mixing it up with the top stars of WCW at the time, like Sting, Ric Flair, and British Bulldog. They even joined forces with Sid and Vader to enter the unforgiving battleground known as War Games. It was when the brothers took on the managerial services of 2006 WWE Hall of Fame inductee Sensational Sherri that their stars began to shine. With Sister Sherri in their corner, it wasn't long before Harlem Heat captured their first WCW Tag Team Championship, defeating Stars and Stripes on WCW Saturday Night. Booker T and Stevie Ray brawled with the likes of the Steiner Brothers, Sting and Lex Luger, and the Nasty Boys on their way to 7 reigns as WCW Tag Team Champions. By 1997, the two brothers went their separate ways, Stevie going on to become a trusted member of the infamous NWO, while Booker became a breakout single star, capturing the WCW television title on several occasions. After nearly 2 years apart, Booker T and Stevie Ray reunited and returned to a vastly different tag team landscape in WCW. However, Harlem Heat hadn't lost a step, as they defeated the Jersey Triad to win their 8th WCW tag team titles at Road Wild 1999. Before the turn of the millennium, they added 2 more reigns as champions to their incredible resume, setting a WCW record that would not be broken before the company was purchased by WWE in 2001. Though the brothers never competed as a team inside a WWE ring, there's no denying their pure dominance of tag team wrestling during the Monday Night Wars. That's why Harlem Heat is being inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. Don't miss Booker T and Stevie Ray take their place in sports entertainment history during the 2019 WWE Hall of Fame induction ceremony on the eve of WrestleMania 35, Saturday, April 6th at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. Tickets are available now. Be sure to take part in this historic night. Always loved seeing Harlem Heat and WCW back in the day. Big congratulations to Booker T and Stevie Ray. That is your news for Monday, March 11th, 2019. Check back here tomorrow for another Jammin' John's Wrestling News Flash Briefing on Amazon Alexa devices, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, and iTunes. Follow me on Twitter at John Caldwell, JONCOLWELL. Follow me on Instagram, The Jammin' John. If you'd like to sponsor Jammin' John's Wrestling News or your wrestling promotion, wanting to get your next big event out, you can email me, jzcaldwell@gmail.com. That's JZCOLWELL@gmail.com. Big shout out to Ryan Hurdle and Tony Nelson for subscribing to my Patreon. You too can subscribe to me by going to patreon.com/jamminjohn. I have free packages on there ranging from free to $7. Not a whole lot of money. I would really appreciate it if you supported me a little bit financially. Once again, that's patreon.com/jamminjohn. This is Jammin' John saying thanks, goodbye, and I'll see you tomorrow.